Have you ever noticed how some women command respect effortlessly? How they seem to float through relationships with grace, never losing themselves, never begging for attention, never compromising their dignity? What if I told you that Carl Jung, one of history's greatest psychological minds, understood exactly what separates a woman with a queen mindset from someone who constantly struggles in relationships? Today, we're diving deep into 5 things a woman with a queen mindset never does for a man. And I promise you by the end of this video, you'll understand why these principles aren't about being cold or distant. They're about maintaining your sovereignty, your self-worth, and your psychological wholeness. Whether you're currently in a relationship, recovering from one, or preparing for your next chapter, these insights will transform how you see yourself and your connections with others. So grab your journal, get comfortable, and let's explore what Jung's profound psychology teaches us about feminine power, self-respect, and authentic love. But before we begin, if you appreciate deep psychological wisdom that actually changes lives, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. This channel is dedicated to bringing you the most powerful insights from psychology's greatest minds. Now, let's begin. Before we dive into the 5 things, let me introduce you to the man behind these insights, Carl Gustav Jung. Born in 1875 in Switzerland, Jung became one of the founding fathers of analytical psychology. But unlike many psychologists of his time, Jung didn't just study the human mind, he explored the human soul. Jung understood something revolutionary, that within each person lies both masculine and feminine energy, what he called the animus and anima. He believed that true psychological wholeness comes from integrating these aspects, not suppressing them. For women, Jung identified the animus, the inner masculine, as a source of strength, clarity, and assertiveness. A woman with a developed animus doesn't need to become aggressive or masculine. Instead, she balances her feminine receptivity with masculine boundary setting. This is what I call the queen mindset. A queen doesn't rule through domination. She reigns through self-possession. She doesn't chase, she attracts. She doesn't beg, she chooses. She doesn't diminish herself, she expands into her full power. Jung spent decades studying fairy tales, myths, and archetypal patterns. And across cultures, he noticed something fascinating. The queen archetype always represents sovereignty, wisdom, and self-containment. Think about it. In every fairy tale, the queen has her own throne. She doesn't sit in the king's lap, begging for his approval. She rules beside him or sometimes without him entirely. This isn't about being anti-relationship or anti-man. It's about understanding that you cannot pour from an empty cup, and you cannot maintain a healthy relationship if you've abandoned yourself in the process. So with that foundation, let's explore the 5 things a woman with a queen mindset never does. Thing 1, she never abandons her individuation process. The first and most crucial thing a queen never does is abandon what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are. Let me tell you a story. I once knew a brilliant woman named Sarah. She was an artist, a dreamer, someone with fire in her eyes and galaxies in her mind. Then she met David. He was charming, successful, and he pursued her relentlessly. Within 6 months, Sarah had stopped painting. She spent her evenings watching his favorite shows instead of creating. Her friends? She barely saw them anymore. Her dreams of opening a gallery? Postponed indefinitely. "I'm in love," she'd say. "I'm making him a priority." But here's what Jung would tell Sarah. You weren't making him a priority. You were making yourself a ghost. Jung believed that the greatest task of human life is individuation, becoming the fullest, most authentic version of yourself. It's about integrating all parts of your psyche, your shadow, your persona, your anima or animus, until you stand as a whole, integrated being. When a woman abandons this process for a man, something dies inside her. Jung would say she falls into what he called participation mystique, a state where boundaries dissolve and she merges with the other person, losing her individual identity. Listen carefully. A man worth having doesn't want you to shrink. He wants you to expand. He wants to witness your becoming, not orchestrate your dissolving. A queen understands this at her core. She continues her education, whether formal or self-directed. She pursues her passions with the same intensity she had before any man entered her life. She honors her creative impulses, her intellectual curiosities, her spiritual seeking. Now, some of you might be thinking, but doesn't compromise matter in relationships? Absolutely. But there's a difference between healthy compromise and self-abandonment. Healthy compromise. I love jazz and you love rock. Let's go to a jazz concert this month and a rock concert next month. Self-abandonment. I love jazz, but you think it's boring, so I'll never mention it again and pretend I enjoy your music instead. Do you see the difference? Jung said something profound. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Notice that word, both. Not one person dissolves while the other remains solid. Both transform. Both grow. Both maintain their essence while creating something new together. A queen doesn't stop becoming herself when she meets a king. In fact, she becomes more herself because a true king celebrates and protects her individuation process. Think about your own life right now. Are you still pursuing your goals? Are you still investing in your growth? Are you still that interesting, multifaceted woman who has her own opinions, her own friends, her own dreams? Or have you become a supporting character in someone else's story? Here's your first action step. Write down 3 things you love doing before your current relationship or before your last relationship if you're single. Choose one. And this week, no matter what, dedicate time to it. Not because you're being selfish, because you're honoring the sacred work of becoming who you were meant to be. And that, my friends, is what queens do. Thing 2, she never makes him her sole source of validation. The second thing a woman with a queen mindset never does is make a man her only source of validation, worth, or emotional fulfillment. This is perhaps the most common trap women fall into, and Jung understood exactly why. Jung observed that many women project their undeveloped animus, their inner masculine, onto external men. What does that mean in plain English? It means they outsource their sense of strength, direction, and self-worth to men instead of developing these qualities within themselves. Let me paint a picture you might recognize. She checks her phone every 5 minutes, waiting for his text. When he compliments her, she floats on air for hours. When he's distant, she spirals into anxiety and self-doubt. His mood determines her mood. His approval determines her self-image. His presence determines her happiness. Jung would say this: woman is caught in what he called inflation through projection. She's given away her power to someone external, making them a god instead of a human. And here's the tragic irony. This behavior actually repels emotionally healthy men. Think about it from a psychological perspective. When you make someone responsible for your entire emotional state, you're not offering them partnership. You're offering them an exhausting job with impossible requirements. No human being can carry the weight of being someone's sole source of validation. It's too much. It creates pressure, resentment, and eventually, distance. A queen has what Jung called a developed self with a capital S. This is the archetype of wholeness, the centered core of her being that doesn't waver based on external circumstances. She celebrates compliments, but doesn't need them to know her worth. She enjoys companionship, but isn't destroyed by solitude. She welcomes love, but doesn't collapse without it. Let me share another story, this time about a woman who embodied this principle perfectly. Her name was Maria, and I watched her navigate a relationship with such grace that it actually inspired this video. Maria was dating someone she deeply cared about, but when he needed space to deal with family issues, do you know what she did? She didn't panic. She didn't send desperate texts. She didn't make it about herself. I'm here when you're ready. And then she turned her attention to her own life. She took a weekend trip with her sister. She finally started that online course she'd been postponing. She went to therapy and worked on her own patterns. And you know what happened? He came back within 2 weeks, deeply impressed by her self-sufficiency and emotional maturity. More importantly, Maria realized something crucial. She was completely fine either way. That's the queen mindset in action. Jung believed that each person has what he called inner figures, aspects of our psyche, that can provide guidance, strength, and wisdom if we learn to access them. A queen develops relationships with these inner resources. She might journal to connect with her inner wisdom, meditate to access her inner peace, create art to express her inner truth, spend time in nature to remember her inner strength, maintain friendships that reflect her worth back to her. She builds a rich inner world and a diverse outer support system. One man is not her sun, moon, and stars. He's a companion on her journey, important, yes, but not her entire universe. Now, some people might say, but isn't love supposed to be all-consuming? Isn't passion supposed to make us a little crazy? And yes, intense attraction exists. Infatuation happens. But Jung distinguished between authentic love and what he called being possessed by an archetype. When you're possessed by the lover archetype, you lose yourself completely. You merge, obsess, and eventually burn out. When you're in authentic love, you remain sovereign while choosing connection. You're enhanced by the relationship, not defined by it. Here's a powerful question Jung might ask you. Who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when he's not around? Who are you in the quiet moments when no external validation is available? If you don't have a clear answer to these questions, it's time to get reacquainted with yourself. Here's your second action step. Create what I call a self-validation practice. Every morning for the next week, write down 3 things. Something you're proud of yourself for. Something you're grateful to yourself for. Something you're looking forward to that has nothing to do with any romantic relationship. This trains your psyche to generate validation internally rather than depending on external sources. Remember, a queen doesn't need a king to feel royal. She already knows her worth. The right king simply recognizes and honors what was always there. Thing 3. She never sacrifices her boundaries for his comfort. The third thing a woman with a queen mindset never does is sacrifice her boundaries for a man's comfort or approval. This might be the most challenging principle for many women, so let's go deep. Jung said something that shook the psychological world. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. What he meant is that when you don't consciously understand your patterns like people-pleasing, boundary violating, or self-betraying, you'll repeat them over and over, thinking this is just how relationships are. But it's not fate. It's an unconscious pattern, and it can change. Many women were socialized to be accommodating, pleasant, and selfless. From childhood, they learn that their value comes from making others comfortable, even at the expense of their own well-being. Jung would call this a dominant but unhealthy persona, a mask we wear to gain social acceptance that becomes so habitual, we forget it's not our true self. A queen has done the inner work to distinguish between her authentic self and her people-pleasing persona. She knows the difference between genuine kindness and self-abandoning compliance. Let me give you some real-world examples of what this looks like. Boundary violation 1. He jokes in a way that actually hurts your feelings. A woman without a queen mindset laughs along, not wanting to be too sensitive. A queen calmly says, "I know you're joking, but that actually doesn't feel good to me. I'd appreciate if we could find other ways to be playful together." Boundary violation 2. He pressures you for physical intimacy before you're ready. A woman without a queen mindset gives in, fearing rejection. A queen says, "I care about you, but I'm not ready for that step yet. If that's a deal breaker for you, I understand, but I'm not compromising on this." Boundary violation 3. He consistently cancels plans at the last minute. A woman without a queen mindset keeps forgiving it, making excuses for him. A queen says, "I notice this pattern and it's not working for me. I need reliability." Let's discuss how we can both honor our commitments. Notice something crucial. Queen doesn't set boundaries with aggression or punishment. She sets them with calm clarity and self-respect. Jung believed that the shadow are unconscious. Repressed aspects often contains our disowned power. For many women, anger, assertiveness, and boundary setting live in the shadow because they were taught these qualities were unfeminine. But here's the truth. Boundaries aren't walls. They're gates. They don't keep love out. They protect love's integrity. A queen understands that a man who truly values her will respect her boundaries. In fact, psychologically healthy men are attracted to women who know their worth and communicate their needs clearly. Why? Because it signals self-respect, emotional maturity, and the promise of a drama-free relationship built on mutual respect rather than manipulation and resentment. I want to share a powerful example from Jungian therapy. A therapist once worked with a woman named Lisa who kept attracting men who didn't respect her time. Through analysis, they discovered that Lisa's father was emotionally unavailable, always promising to spend time with her, but rarely following through. As an adult, Lisa unconsciously recreated this dynamic, accepting breadcrumbs of attention because it felt familiar. The breakthrough came when Lisa realized, "I'm not waiting for these men to change. I'm waiting for my father to finally show up." Once this became conscious, Lisa could separate past wounds from present relationships. She started setting clear expectations about communication and follow-through. Men who couldn't meet these standards naturally fell away. And then she met someone who not only respected her boundaries, but thanked her for having them. Jung taught that we attract what we are, not what we want. If you're unconsciously playing the role of the accommodating woman, you'll attract men looking for someone to accommodate them. But when you embody the queen sovereign, boundaried, self-respecting, you attract men capable of meeting you at that level. I know what some of you are thinking, but what if I set a boundary and he leaves? And here's the queen's perspective. If someone leaves because you have boundaries, they weren't the right person. They were looking for someone to control, not someone to love. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. A relationship that requires you to betray yourself is not a privilege, it's a prison. Here's your third action step. Identify one area where you've been compromising a boundary. Maybe it's accepting disrespectful communication. Maybe it's allowing someone to monopolize your time. Maybe it's tolerating behavior that violates your values. Write down what the boundary is, why it matters to you, how you'll communicate it clearly and calmly, what consequence you'll implement if it's repeatedly violated. Remember, consequences aren't punishments. They're simply what you do to protect yourself when a boundary isn't respected. For example, if you continue to speak to me in a disrespectful tone, I'll end the conversation and we can revisit it when we're both calm. That's not controlling. That's self-respecting. A queen doesn't apologize for her boundaries. She doesn't negotiate her non-negotiables. And she certainly doesn't set herself on fire to keep someone else warm. She understands that real love doesn't require self-betrayal. It celebrates authenticity. And any man intimidated by your boundaries is showing you exactly who he is. Someone who wants access without accountability. A true king? He'll honor your gates with gratitude, knowing that within them lives a woman worth protecting. Thing 4. She never ignores the red flags her intuition reveals. The fourth thing a woman with a queen mindset never does is ignore the red flags her intuition clearly reveals. This is where Jung's concept of the unconscious becomes absolutely crucial. Jung believed that the unconscious mind perceives far more than the conscious mind. It picks up on subtle patterns, micro-expressions, energy shifts, and inconsistencies that our rational mind might dismiss or explain away. This is what we call intuition, and women, Jung noted, often have particularly developed intuitive functions. But here's the tragedy. Many women have been conditioned to doubt their intuition, especially when it conflicts with what they want to believe about a man. How many times have you experienced this? Your gut says, something's off about this person. Your mind says, you're being paranoid. Give him a chance. Your intuition whispers, this pattern feels familiar and not in a good way. Your rationalization responds, but he's different from the others. This time will be different. Your inner wisdom screams, this is not healthy. Your hope argues, but I can help him change. My love will fix this. Jung would say that when you override your intuition, you're essentially silencing the wisdom of your entire unconscious. Millions of years of evolutionary adaptation, personal experience, and archetypal knowledge. You're choosing fantasy over reality, potential over actuality, hope over evidence. And listen, I get it. I understand the seduction of potential. I understand wanting to believe in someone. I understand the intoxication of chemistry. That makes you want to ignore the warning signs. But a queen has learned a hard truth. People show you who they are. Believe them the first time. Maya Angelou said this, but Jung would absolutely agree. Your unconscious is constantly gathering data. When someone shows you they're unreliable, unkind, dishonest, or emotionally unavailable, your intuition registers this immediately. The question is, will you listen? Let me tell you about Elena, smart, accomplished, beautiful, and completely blind to red flags when she met Marcus. Red flag 1. He love-bombed her intensely in the first 2 weeks, then pulled back dramatically. Red flag 2. He spoke disrespectfully about his ex-girlfriends, blaming them for everything that went wrong. Red flag 3. He had an excuse for everything, why he didn't have a stable job, why his friends had all distanced themselves, why his family was toxic. Red flag 4. He pushed for commitment quickly but couldn't define what that commitment actually meant. Elena's intuition screamed at her after every interaction. She'd feel anxious, drained, confused. But she kept rationalizing. He's been through a lot. He just needs patience and understanding. 1 year later, Elena had spent thousands of dollars supporting him, had isolated herself from friends who questioned the relationship, and had developed anxiety she'd never experienced before. When she finally left, she said something heartbreaking. All the signs were there from day one. I just didn't want to see them. Here's what Jung understood. Ignoring red flags isn't optimism. It's denial. And denial is a defense mechanism that protects your ego in the short term, but damages your wholeness in the long term. A queen has developed what Jung called consciousness, the ability to see reality clearly, even when it's uncomfortable. She doesn't need a man to be perfect, but she does require him to be honest, consistent, respectful, emotionally available, taking responsibility for his life, treating others with basic decency. These aren't impossibly high standards. They're the bare minimum for healthy relationships. Jung also spoke about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. Sometimes, we ignore red flags because seeing them would force us to confront our own shadows, our fear of being alone, our pattern of choosing unavailable partners, our belief that we don't deserve better. A queen does her shadow work. She asks herself the hard questions. Why am I attracted to men who can't meet my needs? What am I getting out of staying in situations that hurt me? What wound from my past am I trying to heal through this person? These questions aren't comfortable, but they're transformative. Here are some common red flags that women with queen mindsets never ignore. 1. Inconsistency between words and actions. He says he cares but doesn't show it through behavior. 2. Lack of accountability. He blames others for everything, never owns his mistakes. 3. Pushing boundaries. He pressures you sexually, emotionally, or financially. 4. Isolation tactics. He subtly criticizes your friends and family, making you feel guilty for spending time with them. 5. Hot and cold behavior. Intense connection followed by withdrawal, creating addictive intermittent reinforcement. 6. Disrespect toward others. How he treats waiters, his mother, his ex, strangers. This will eventually be how he treats you. 7. Refusal to communicate about the relationship. He won't define things, won't discuss the future, won't address conflicts. 8. Your intuition feels consistently uneasy. You feel anxious, drained, or confused after interactions. If you're experiencing multiple items on this list, your intuition is trying to protect you. Listen to it. Your 4th action step, journal about your current or recent relationship and honestly answer these questions. What red flags did I notice early on? What did my intuition tell me that I ignored? What fears or wounds made me override my inner wisdom? What would a woman who deeply respected herself do in this situation? This isn't about self-blame. It's about consciousness. It's about learning to trust yourself again. Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. A queen is awake. She doesn't dream about who someone could be. She responds to who they actually are. And when her intuition says, "This isn't right," she doesn't argue. She doesn't rationalize. She doesn't give just one more chance. She trusts herself. And she walks away with grace. Because a queen never compromises her peace for potential. Thing 5. She never waits for him to give her permission to live. And now we arrive at the 5th and final thing a woman with a pine teen with a pine teen with a pine cromcont with the 5th and final thing a woman with a fine sea of can one with a fine indupan vama. Queen mindset never does. She never waits for a man to give her permission to fully live her life. This might be the most subtle but powerful principle of all. Jung spent his life studying what he called unlived life, the dreams deferred, the passion suppressed, the authentic self hidden away because it didn't fit someone else's expectations. And he noticed a tragic pattern. Many people, especially women, put their lives on hold waiting for permission that never comes. Permission to pursue their dreams. Permission to take that trip. Permission to make that career change. Permission to be fully, authentically themselves. They wait for a partner to support them, validate them, join them. And in the waiting, years pass. Dreams fade. The authentic self grows quieter. Let me ask you something. How many things have you postponed because you're waiting for the right relationship or because your current partner isn't enthusiastic about them? How many versions of yourself have you shelved because they didn't fit into his vision of who you should be? A queen understands something crucial. Your life is happening now, not when you're in a relationship, not when he's ready, not when circumstances are perfect. Now, Jung called this the process of individuation, becoming fully yourself. And he was clear. This process cannot be postponed. It cannot be negotiated. It cannot wait for someone else's approval. Here's what living with a queen mindset looks like in practice. She wants to travel to Italy. She books the ticket with or without a partner. She wants to go back to school. She enrolls regardless of anyone's opinion. She wants to start that business, write that book, learn that language. She begins because her dreams aren't negotiable. This doesn't mean she's inconsiderate or doesn't value partnership. It means she understands that the greatest gift she can bring to any relationship is a fully alive, fully expressed version of herself. I want to tell you about a woman named Gabriella who embodied this principle beautifully. At 38, she'd always dreamed of learning to surf and spending time by the ocean. But her partner of 5 years had no interest. He was a city person, deeply rooted in his routine. For years, Gabriella mentioned it casually, hoping he'd warm up to the idea. He didn't. Finally, she had a realization. I'm waiting for permission to live a dream that's entirely my own. Why? So Gabriella took a 3-week solo trip to Costa Rica. She learned to surf. She connected with an amazing community. She came back radiant, transformed, fully alive. Her partner? He was initially resistant, even hurt, but then something shifted. He saw her happiness. He saw her confidence. He saw the version of her that emerges when she honors her authentic desires. Their relationship actually deepened because Gabriella stopped abandoning herself and started living fully. That's the paradox. When you stop waiting for permission and start honoring yourself, you become more attractive, more magnetic, more whole. Jung believed that we each have a unique self, with a capital S, an archetypal image of wholeness that wants to be expressed through our lives. When we suppress this self to make others comfortable, we don't just betray ourselves. We betray the very purpose of our existence. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Why terrifying? Because it means taking full responsibility for your life. It means stopping the blame game. It means no longer using your relationship status as an excuse for unlived dreams. But what if living my life fully threatens my relationship? Then you have your answer about the relationship. Any partnership that requires you to stay small is not love, it's control. A true king celebrates your expansion. He might not join every adventure, but he supports your becoming. He might not share every interest, but he respects your autonomy. Here's your 5th and final action step. Create what I call your permission-free life list. Write down 3 things you've been waiting to do until you have a partner. 3 things you've postponed because your partner isn't interested. 3 versions of yourself you've suppressed to make someone comfortable. Now pick one item from this list and take action on it this month. Not someday. This month. Book the class. Plan the trip. Start the project. Express that suppressed part of yourself. Not to prove anything. Not to make a statement. Simply because your life is yours to live, and waiting is just another form of self-abandonment. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. A queen chooses to become fully herself, partner or no partner, approval or no approval, perfect circumstances or imperfect ones. She doesn't wait for life to begin. She begins. And in that beginning, she discovers something profound. She was never waiting for a king to complete her. She was always whole, always sovereign, always royal. She just needed to remember. So there you have it, the 5 things a woman with a queen mindset never does for a man, grounded in Carl Jung's profound psychological wisdom. Let's recap. 1. She never abandons her individuation process. She continues becoming herself, always. 2. She never makes him her sole source of validation. She generates worth from within. 3. She never sacrifices her boundaries for his comfort. She protects her integrity. 4. She never ignores the red flags her intuition reveals. She trusts her inner wisdom. 5. She never waits for him to give her permission to live. She acts on her dreams now. These aren't rules to memorize. They're principles to embody. They're a return to your sovereign self. Jung believed that the goal of life is wholeness, integrating all aspects of yourself into a conscious, authentic existence. The queen mindset isn't about being perfect. It's about being whole. It's about honoring yourself so deeply that you can love another without losing yourself. So I invite you, step into your sovereignty. Claim your throne, not with arrogance, but with quiet, unshakable self-respect. Because the world doesn't need more women who've made themselves small. It needs queens who know their worth and live accordingly. If this video resonated with you, please like it, share it with a woman who needs this message, and subscribe for more deep psychological wisdom. Comment below, which of these 5 principles challenges you most? Let's build a community of women supporting each other's sovereignty. And remember, you don't need a king to be a queen. You already are one. Now go live like it.